am now calling the Tax Abatement Study and Formulating Committee to order. We are hoping that we'll be joined by, we know we'll be joined by at least one more member who's on her way. But in the interest of time, let's go ahead and start our review and hopefully bless this plan and get it in front of the council. So thank you all for serving here. Again, just because it's been a while, I'm just going to remind you that our goal was to study how Metro uses pilot TIF and other tax abatements, consider priorities, and how and whether there should be a spending cap. So we have spent close to a year now thinking about this, and I think we've come a long way, which I appreciate. So if you remember last meeting, we met with Dr. Kyle Wiedberg and got his overview from how the Government Finance Officials Association provides some guidelines specifically around some types of tax abatements, but they haven't really worked through the whole issue of whether there should be some type of absolute cap or percentage cap, and that was sort of the final piece that we wanted to get comfortable with. So we had a good discussion based on information that he provided, and then left with instructions to work those suggestions into the final document. So that shows up in, I would say, 3 places: in the executive summary and in the assessments area. I've added several new paragraphs there. The conclusions and recommendations mirrors the executive summary pretty closely. And then there's some data that finance helped pull together that is a separate document. And I want to jump to that for just a second because it was just eye-opening to me to look at a couple of things. So if you can find that legal size document, it's this one, separate from the actual report itself. And what that shows is the pilots and job grants. Right now, the TIFs are not, the pilots for low-income housing tax credits are not here. They're in another document we'll get to in a minute. But what's noteworthy is below the projections of what those would be based on the bills that are passed and what council says blesses as we think this is what the tax abatement will look like. Underneath that, you'll see something that's called the ACFR Year Actual Abatements Expenditures. That stands, ACFR is what used to be the CAFR. So that's the annual certified financial report that's done 6 months after the fiscal year ends and is truly blessed and certified, and we know those numbers are right. And what's striking is how often we say this abatement is going to start this year and be this much. And often they don't start for another couple of years, and the numbers may be remarkably different. And that's part of what Dr. Wiedberg was talking about when he said, you know, do you look back and see if a project, quote, underperforms or overperforms? Are they saving a whole lot more money or having a whole lot more tax abated than you thought they would? And if so, what adjustments will you make on that? So this, to me, gives a whole lot more life to that question. Now, when I look at the actual expenditures, 2 things jump out. One is that when MDHA, who has done most of the tax abatement legislation that council members look at, they look at the existing tax rate, and they may assume some kind of smooth inflation or something, but they don't take into account what happens when we have a reappraisal and or a tax increase. And so interestingly, you can look at, I think it's the year 2021 on the second page. Let's keep track of where year 2021 is. There are a couple of abatements that just skyrocket in the course of 1 year, simply because of changes that were made in the tax rate. I guess one of them's before you flip the page, and one of them's after. And so let's see. Yeah, if you look at 2021.
Omni
The Omni, Ramen Hospitality, some of the larger properties, suddenly the tax that they were paying was significantly more, and so the abatement that we're giving them is also significantly more. And it's not for this group to necessarily make the decision, what's that gonna be, but I think it, to me, gives me, new, emphasis on the importance of ensuring that we, include that as part of our instructions in our recommendations. So the other piece that was information that I hadn't seen broken out in this particular way were the TIF agreements through the redevelopment districts. Again, we pass a bill and say we think it's gonna happen in this year, and there are many of these where you'll look and you made it. Thank you for being here, Councilmember Toombs. We have a quorum. Some of those still aren't getting any abatement yet. But that just means that it will extend further into the future. So we are looking at this report that Finance put together that takes the projected numbers that we've been looking at and compares that to what shows up in the ACFR at the end of the year, and there are some dramatic differences in that. So that's just I think it's important for us to make sure that we emphasize the importance of the annual report and look back and how did this do compared to what we thought it was going to do.
But should we include that in a part of the?
That you can decide if the way that I said it emphasizes that enough. So that being said, so data that we have more and more pieces of data are being filled in the appendix, and this will go in some form in parts of the appendix. I have been working on a summary that sort of captures the bottom line of each of these numbers for a number of different years and compares it to some metric yet to be determined. I had been using the overall operating budget. Other people in finance have said, do we want to compare it to what our debt service is or what our overall net assets are or whatever? So again, that's not something that we've determined, but I think to leave it to the next group that we're going to talk about, to say we are going to require an annual report from each entity that does this. We are going to require that key information gets brought over to a central database, which can then drive people back to the other department places to get more detail if they want it. But to have standardized information that's there, as well as all the information about what these do and where to go if I want to be applying for that. So that's some of the stuff. So I would suggest that we go to the section 4 in the study, in the report, which is where we kind of had our assessment of things, and that's where most of the changes have happened since last month when we looked at the report. So we had gone through as a group and described the different types of abatements that we have been historically giving. And then after some discussion with the trustee, I have added the low-income property tax freeze, because that is a type of property tax that we decide we're okay never seeing. And Eugene from the office, from the trustee's office, was able to give me some numbers for that for a couple of years. So, and it's on the order of $3 or $4 million.
And is that Metro enabled or state enabled?
State gives us the authority to do it.
Okay.
We decide whether to do it or not. We choose to do it.
Okay,
they set the amount.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of up to the citizens how many people take advantage of it. So it's to some degree a moving number, but it's on the order of $3 or $4 million and has never gotten above that based on the records that I had. So that seemed appropriate to me because again, keeping people in their houses is important, and that's something we choose to do. And we've just never thought about it in the context of how many of these things we're doing. And then I added another section, 3.7, called Other Tax Exemptions and Redirects. Again, just so that we acknowledge that they exist. And some of these I'm simply describing that state has enabled us to redirect some sales tax, hotel motex, and rental tax things that go straight to specific projects and figure into their budget. They're not part of our budget, but we just need to be aware of them as well. So I've added that section about that. So that's the only quote new programs that are mentioned in there. Any comments on that? Any other things we might want to add? Seems to be okay? Okay, great. Just gonna make a note.
Councilwoman Allen, how did you get the 300 million?
That is from the trustee's office. They went back and looked at their records.
Okay, for the under
sorry.
3.7?
No, that one is, if I need to put more, I mean, I tried to word it in enough of a mushy way that it was clear it was not an official number. That came from looking at similar property square footage and what they paid, and just said, you know, if we get, I mean, I think I even just said, if there's this much acreage of property that is taxed and we get this much tax from it, and there's this much property that's not taxed, you know, let's just do a proportional something or other. That is not at all scientific. I mean, it's much of an order of estimate as anything, but it's just useful to know that it's more than 3 or 4 million. It's
Right, so that's looking at Music City Center and the properties that are owned by the Sports Authority?
no, that is all of our wonderful nonprofits that do great things like churches, institutions,
Oh, everything,
all
okay.
those things, and
Okay.
there's a lot of it. So
Okay,
I think the assessor's office was nice enough to just say, all we can do is tell you we've got this many acres under that.
gotcha, okay.
So it's a very rough number, and I hope that
Okay.
what did I say? Let me see.
Yeah, Justin, you got some number? Was it just the acreage that we got? Because you were the one who tracked this down for us, right?
I don't recall. I remember the assessor did respond. She did give, I think, an idea of the acreage. I think she also came up with the number
I
as
think
well.
she did
if
too.
I'm
I thought
not
that. I
mistaken.
had a
I'll
vague
go back and
recollection.
look.
That one's not in our control.
Right,
It's not in our control.
yeah.
It is not included in any of the things that we add up. It is just, it just came up during the course of conversation and seemed like something that we realized we had no clue how it compared with anything, so.
There is, I found the email from the assessor of property, and total estimate was 196 million.
Okay, let's change that
800.
then.
Yeah.
All right, I will not argue with the assessor. Say that one more time.
The total is 196,803,981.
Okay,
Do you want me to?
can we just round that to 197 million?
Approximately 200 million might be a nice
That might
way.
even better. Okay, so I was high. Thank you for that correction. Not in our control. Okay, so anyway, that's just there for sort of context, and comparison. Thank you for that. Any other comments on that section 3, which was just our assessment and description of stuff? Great. Okay, so then on to the next, I mean, that was just a description of things. And then section 4 was our sort of assessment of how things were working or what things we had discovered we wanted to make changes to.
Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
can I make a recommendation on 3.7
Yes.
before you move on? Under the sales, hotel, and rental car tax redirects,
Uh-huh.
under convention center, tourist, that needs to say sales taxes rather than just taxes.
Okay, let me,
I think it's mentioned in there twice, and it just should be clear that it's.
this directs new sales taxes from
Yes,
much of the
instead of
year.
new taxes.
Okay.
Taxes is really broad.
Gotcha. That's where they had pulled out my red page and lost, so that's not gonna work. Okay. Lucan? Okay. got it, okay, thank you for that. Anything else? Sales tax, great, okay, on to the next section. This is where we were inserting comments from the, our GFOA consultant. So, I had added, we've talked a lot about the need for transparency. I have added quantitative reporting of outcomes on an annual basis. I think we heard that loud and clear, and it's something that we.
Which section are you in?
I am on page 11, number 4, assessments.
Okay.
The committee's review of the existing tools identified many areas of success and a few opportunities for improvement. Areas for improvement include the need for transparency, quantitative reporting of outcomes on an annual basis. I think that's something we had a lot of discussion about. Ongoing review of priorities and all incentive programs, and then including renewing and growing programs that are working and assessing what programs are not working. So it was just that, adding that quantitative reporting of outcomes on an annual basis. It's kind of the overall, and then we go more specifically into each of those. So under the need for transparency and process definition, the legal folks had suggested that we needed to look at areas where it would be beneficial to have some standardized language between all the different programs that are out there. And I think some of that is just the making sure that we're going to get the data back that we need for the ongoing monitoring and reporting. And we had talked a whole lot about tax incentive transparency database, but it's also important, I think, to talk about the centralized website, which is a little bigger than just the database, is having that. And so the committee recommends a centralized website to be developed under Metro Trustee's office. They agreed to host it, and that made as much sense as anybody else. Everyone else wanted it. That summarizes the programs available and provides links to the appropriate agencies. And this would include the tax incentive transparency database, which we have lots of description of. And that would summarize key data from the other sites, linking to more detailed databases or dashboards for each category. And data on the central site would include the start, duration, total and annual abatement amounts for each project. And I think we need to say actual, because that's the thing that's been confusing some of us.
I'm kind of confused on the summarizing key data. That I didn't put that there, so.
No, I have messed in everybody's sections, and I apologize, but that's what's in red. That seemed like the most logical place to put what he said we needed to do. And I wanted to ensure that we're doing it in a place that shows up where everybody can find it, because that's the thing that we've all agreed is most important.
So we go bring data from other sites into this site. Okay, and then we're gonna provide them links to go back out.
Right, like to MDHA, if you want to drill down into everything, you can go to MDHA to find out the stuff about their redevelopment districts.
Okay.
But key data on it, like when did it start, how much is it,
Okay.
year after year, when is it going to end?
Okay.
That's
Kind of like the information that you're adding to this appendix. This will be considered the key data.
right.
Okay, and then if they want to know more, they
You can go to those.
Mhm.
Go to that site.
Okay.
That's exactly right. And then, the metrics, I think there are kind of two levels of metrics. One is, did it do what it was supposed to? Did it create jobs? How many jobs did you say you were going to create? Did it create housing? Did it provide childcare for how many children? So, again, some of this we're not going into full detail, but we're going to give enough guidance that the council, I think, will then pass a resolution or an ordinance and say who's going to do it, and then they do it, and we follow them. That's.
I did have a question. This
Yes,
is
ma'am.
kind of out. What if, will all approved abatements be included? Because I was speaking to another colleague, and they stated that there was one on Jefferson Street that was approved that never went through, and that particular landowner was supposed to return the money back. So will the failures be included?
Mm-hmm. I mean, they should either show up as all zeros or negative numbers or something.
I was curious.
And there's more detail back in this long sheet on the third page under, third page.
outstanding TIF agreement?
TIF agreements, yeah. There's some things there that just show nothing's happened yet, so there's still zeros all the way across, so. Again, having that where we can now find it, I think is part of the way that we can better understand what's actually been happening on some of those. And then at the end of that section, I have added, it would also be beneficial to standardize language and requirements of key aspects of these various tools. And I will look to Metro Legal to help guide, if we need to put more language in this document, or if more, and Mark, Director Darby, you can tell me. What I see as the next step is a council, either resolution or ordinance, whatever it needs to be, that says these things need to happen, and these entities need to make it happen. So,
I think that we could do a non-binding resolution requesting that, certain elements of the report be
Gotcha.
undertaken by certain departments.
gotcha. And so each step will add a little more specificity to that. And a review by Metro Legal and Finance could align selection criteria descriptions, because right now, that's still kind of fuzzy, performance metrics and reporting requirements, so that expectations are clear on the front end and all receive similar scrutiny and review. I think that reflects what we wanted to do.
Let me ask one other question.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm looking at what my conclusive data was that the database should also provide a definition of the available tools and a description of the way they can be used. These terms should be described in a means where the layman can understand. So, will that database include that? Because I think that's very important.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I believe that language, are you reading that from
From my
the original
conclusive
thing?
data.
I think we
Yeah,
split
what
that up into two places. Much of it is here, and the rest of it is in the appendix, Appendix H.
I just don't want to get lost because,
I hear you.
we got kudos. That was yeah.
Yeah, check
And
Appendix H, which is the last page of there. Grand finale. Anything?
We hold the, okay.
Does that capture what we wanted to do? Okay. And then, I did a little bit of rearranging here. Evolving city and community priorities. We, wanted to add both the importance of having a review process that acknowledges we may be moving from job creation now to housing, childcare, groceries, things like that. And so, the section that I've added, this is close to the bottom of page 13. The priority review should be performed at two levels. First, each program should have an established review process by its board or commission on a fixed schedule to ensure that priorities are aligned with both public need and the mission of the program. So IDB would do theirs, MDHA does theirs, HEB does theirs. For programs that are geographically based, this is Councilmember James, this would include review and update of the areas included, and program caps, if any, should be evaluated. Processes should be spelled out regarding remedies if projects underperform, or ways to capture or use surplus income if projects overperform, because we're not doing that now. The mission, priorities, and criteria for approval should be clearly stated on the program website. And I think that goes back to some of the things that you're asking for as well. And then at a higher level, a mutual benefit committee, that was a term that Dr. Weedberg came up with, should be convened, I've got annually, we can talk about that, to review the aggregate incentives available, evaluate what is currently available, whether what is currently available addresses current public needs, and recommend changes to existing programs or the addition of new programs. The committee should work with the finance director, Mr. Mendez, this is the part you were looking for, to evaluate the effect of all abatements on Metro's operating budget. This committee would consist of representatives from each of the agencies administering tax abatements, currently MDHA, IDB, HEFB, Metro Historic, with the possible addition of NDOT for transitory development, as well as Metro Finance, Metro Legal, the Trustees Office, Metro Council, an appropriate citizen representative, and the Mayor's Office of Economic Development. Does that cover everybody? And that's Mr. Mendez and Bob Mendez.
There's been in the years that we've been around Metro, Office of Economic Development has had
Or its equivalent.
7 different iterations. So maybe just mayor's office?
Okay? And we'll let him decide. But that's probably who he'd send. I'm good with that. That's a good point. Other groups? And I've deliberately left, I mean, I do feel like there should be just Joe Citizen on there somewhere, but I don't know how he gets, how he or she gets chosen or what, but TBD. And then, Councilmember Toombs, your specific example about MDHA and looking at different geographic areas, or noting that one has had absolutely nothing when all the others have had something. So hopefully that still feels like the right place for that. And then the committee generated a list of current city priorities for consideration, which includes affordable housing, grocery stores, childcare, infrastructure, historic preservation, small and diverse business support. The Mutual Benefit Committee could continue to update this list on an ongoing basis and make recommendations to the council about reauthorization of programs. So we've sort of got things happening at two levels, the different agencies as well as this sort of, once a year convening of a representative from each of those. Does that feel like the right approach? And then that group and the finance director can at some point say, oh my gosh, we've gotten way out over skis, there are too many things happening here, we gotta pull back, or something. And hopefully we have now given them enough ways to find that data that they can make that. And then these things I think kind of pull apart and then run back together again. The ongoing incentive program review. During our assessment, the committee noted that there was not a consistent ongoing review process for each incentive program at a comprehensive level. So, so then we go back to talk about looking at the priorities. Those two paragraphs may need to go back together. At the time, it made sense to have them separate.
Talk about 4.3.
Yeah, so 4.2 is about how city priorities, well, this is program review, so I think that's the difference. Maybe I should just say program. This would include financial data like, looking at the numbers to say, has this accomplished what it's supposed to? We haven't done that. And what metrics do we need to measure this against to ensure that we are,
So who determines the metrics that we're gonna use?
I believe that will be the next step. I think the council will say, these smart people pulling from various and different departments need to sit down and, and I think it's appropriate for us to give them the ones that have been thrown out so far, including but not limited to overall operating budget, debt service, net worth, and those kinds of things.
And is the program review, is that something different than what the Mutual Benefit Committee does?
Well, and y'all can help me think this through. I think we have said we want to make sure that people check to make sure the incentives and the priorities are correct. And then we also need a quantitative review of, are the things that we're doing performing the way they said they were going to? So they're two different things, and I think they both kind of happen at both those levels. And I think my intention was to divide it between the priority part and the numbers part. So I may need to.
So for checks and balances, to create checks and. So here's just my question. I'm just asking. So should the people who actually are administering these abatements be the people who do the checks and balances?
I think that's why we got the two levels.
Okay.
And that also includes a whole lot of, the Mutual Benefit Committee, if we're gonna call it that, has a lot of people that are not in someone from finance and someone from legal.
UDHA, IDB, all of those people administer these abatements.
That's correct, and there will be one person from IDB, but everyone else will not be from IDB.
Okay.
So if they look at it and say, IDB, we don't think this looks right, then they gotta take that back to their board and say, okay, IDB board, here's what I heard from the overall group. They say we need to make these changes. Does that sound right? I think that's why we need the two levels. All right, well, ask folks to read 4.2 and 4.3 one more time and reflect on that and send Margaret any thoughts if that has not come through appropriately. Okay, and then we talked about expanding the low-income housing tax credit pilot and the transit-oriented development TIF districts. And we talked about, Councilmember Toombs, your suggestion about looking at the higher percentages of the area median income and just acknowledging that we are not. And Nick, you want to talk a little bit about your purple edition there?
Sure, yeah, I also sort of, as we're looking into it, I was thinking, Councilmember Toombs, you're just probably more thinking about new construction of like this thing that's beyond the sort of LIHTC typical where we have
Right.
some degree of production. So sort of thinking about, just whomever it is, but look into the possibility of ways to preserve existing, more attainable housing that is falling through the cracks and disappearing rapidly. And if we can figure out tools to help make that happen, that would be great. I don't know if folks here were at the 10-year anniversary of the Barnes Fund, but the story of the Habitat homeowner like really stuck with me for a number of reasons. But one of which was a story about the apartment that she was living in where the rent kept on going up and up and up. Was just how that, I mean, it was a very moving, all of it, but that part of it just sort of said it. We need to figure out all the different tools we can use to help preserve the existing structures that are, more affordable right now. And, what happens is if you invest in them, your taxes are going to go up by a lot. The incentive structure is to perhaps buy them, invest in them, and make as much possible as possible. So if there's a tool that we can use, and we have not, there's something out there that I wanted to flag. I thought it dovetailed nicely
Gotcha.
with things
And maybe
we talked
some
about.
housing consultant. And then, come up with that. And then I specifically added a section about the overall budget cap consideration, because that's part of what drove us in the first place. So
Yeah.
to not end with, and here's the cap that we recommend, needs an explanation of why we have come to a more nuanced conclusion on that. So we have said there may be a point where too much potential revenue is being diverted. We didn't feel like we should come up with an absolute or even a percentage cap. The financial health of the city, the direct and indirect benefits of different programs, future potential growth all figure into decisions about what can be tolerated. The committee determined that the annual and periodic review processes recommended should provide the finance director, the administration, and the council with relevant information and parameters to evaluate potential programs and projects. So, does that statement encapsulate what we've come to?
A nice job.
I think it's definitely a group. I mean, the number of different colors is evidence of the collaborative nature of this. And so our conclusions and recommendations have not changed that much, except that we have added the convening of a mutual benefit committee to update the city priorities and review the utilization of tax incentive programs against specific performance metrics. And then council could reauthorize programs, considering both the priorities supported and compatibility with our long-term budget plan. So we're also putting in a plug for a long-term budget plan, which I think is good. And we did just renew the cooperation agreement with Metro and DJ.
Also, already won? You already did it?
Yeah,
Great.
that just passed, so I think,
Better get the report out before the
Right.
Pilot amount goes up,
right. We didn't change the number, but we did the
because
report
it's
out.
coming soon.
Right.
I consider that a success.
So, that being said, I would invite folks to go home and read paragraphs 4.2 and 4.3 and see if we said what we wanted to do. If I pulled those apart correctly, because right now they don't feel like, I totally threaded them the way I wanted to, but I think we're close. I think we're very close. There are lots of tables in the back. I think that all the information is important to include. I'm not sure I'll be able to make it gorgeous and user-friendly, but I think having it all in there is more important than
Yeah.
looking professional. So we will add to this great spreadsheet that, Finance has put together. They were still waiting on the latest and greatest low-income housing tax credit pilot information from MDHA, because what I have is close to a year old now. So that will be added there as well, and then, my goal is to create a smaller one-page summary that you can just look at and go, oh, look, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, today, here's what these categories added up to, and it was only 0.5% of our total budget. This year, it adds up to this much, and how about that, it's 4% of our total budget. Where are we headed? Which is not to say we should stop, but just we should pay attention and we should do a better job of quantifying all that. So that's, again, that's in there under paragraph H. There's no H.
Yeah, it is.
It is, okay,
There's no
on the
G.
backside.
You mean the appendix?
Yeah, appendix,
There's no G.
it's appendix G is, yeah, in red. Yeah, so appendix G is where we are, there's still a few numbers to be filled in there. But I would say I have dated this for April 30th with the goal of presenting it to the council. I don't know if it'll just be a 5-minute add-on to a budget committee meeting. Any thoughts on what the best way to do that is?
Yeah, probably just a presentation to Budget and Finance.
And I think we can get the key points across without,
The email blast out to the full council.
yeah. That's a great idea. That's a great idea. So I would say let's stick with that April 30th for our final version. And then we will try to have it on the agenda for Budget Committee, first meeting in May. That's gonna be
I think it's
budget.
May 6th, is that right? May 6th is the budget finance.
And at that point, we'll have had the state of Metro address, what will we be doing? We should remember.
State of Metro usually happens the day the budget gets filed.
Right.
We haven't received a resolution setting the State of Metro address yet, so hopefully that will come on the April 16th meeting.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Margaret.
And then so we will have had, hopefully we will have had that before the May 6th Budget and Finance Committee meeting.
Yeah, so just in
But
terms,
this report is supposed to be issued to the council before the end of April, so it might be best to send it out to all the council members with a
Okay.
note saying it will be presented at a committee meeting.
Gotcha.
Talk to the chair about that.
or do we want to bump it up to April 15th and try to have it in an April meeting? Get in front of the budget.
I think just sending it out by the end of the month.
Okay. We'll do that. It gives us a little time to finish up a few rough edges.
Yep.
But
Do we plan on meeting again? I think we're not planning on meeting again, is that correct?
I think certain people would shoot me if I suggested that.
So what else, should we make, is the next sort of order of business before the end of the day, is to empower a final editor who's,
The chair of the committee.
chair of the committee to
Okay.
make the final edits, and as long as it's not substantially different from what's in front of us,
Yeah.
then
Yeah,
we are good. Is that
Okay.
kind of something that would be helpful to?
If we may intercede here for a
Yeah,
moment.
you may.
So you guys do need a vote actually on the final report.
on the final.
Yes.
Can it have any edits to it after the final report is approved?
What if they're not
Well,
material?
so, right,
Go ahead,
I don't
go
wanna
ahead.
step on you,
Go
but
ahead.
you know, right now, what we're looking at is a red line version of a document. There are still changes to be made. We're still you still wanna go back and review sections 4.3 and
Yeah.
4.2 and make sure those mesh properly. I think it would be helpful to have a non-red line version in front of everybody that's final, that you walk in the room, take a vote, and walk out of the room. You know, and I hate, I'm usually the bearer of the bad news, so
She specializes.
I'm used to being in that position,
Yeah.
but that is,
Okay.
that would be my recommendation, and
I think that's a good recommendation. Okay. then I would say,
I have a non-red line version. Printed out.
there you go.
If anyone else want to look at it,
It's got blooming colors.
it's got pretty good.
We did that several years
I did
ago
have
with
a
Blue
quick
Ribbon.
question.
Okay.
Can they cost, because there's a cost to Metro to provide city services when these projects come online. Even with the, the LIHTC, the housing, we gotta provide fire, police, trash to those projects. So is that like one of the metrics that this future committee would look at, or can we put a recommendation to look at that? Cause that is an actual cost to the city on top of the tax abatement.
And schools, which we've already pulled out. I mean, I would say running our government is the cost, and our full budget is. Yeah, how would you word that? Let's.
Well, I have to think about the wording.
Yeah.
But that is, because when we bring on more properties, more businesses, that adds to the cost of services.
Cost of services.
Let me ask a question. So, we're talking about passing this on to another committee. Is that going to delay the creation of the database? Because these matrix and these numbers.
No, because we have to empower and budget some department to do that work. And so we've got to move towards that direction and having the council say, here's who's responsible for what, get
And
it
then
in
they
your
can
budget and
just
start doing
add
it.
to it because it's a working, living. Okay,
Right.
okay. I was hoping that's what you were going to say.
So the sooner the better. Okay, so we can just ask them to, that may be a big one though. Okay, so I'm gonna say the metrics to compare against have been the operating budget, just the whole thing. Then we looked at debt service and total asset value. I think that's. And then cost of services, something else that might be considered. Okay, I think that's, okay, so the plan for reporting to council is, thanks to Council Director Darby. Okay, so finalized version. So what I will do is, I will create the non-red line version, put it on the SharePoint as that, and then if anybody has comments, you will send them to Director Darby. And with Director Darby, what can you do with those comments?
I can add them to if there are changes, like if you had a comment of change for the section 4.3 to 4.2 or something, then I can add that in there and send it back to Chair.
Okay. Cool, all right, that's gonna be the plan then. So let me try to have that there, and then would we, pull out calendars, have the quickest meeting in history in 2 weeks, or what amount of time? And I promised y'all. I'm sorry. That would be,
Yeah, I don't actually think, knowing myself, more time does not mean that more work gets done over
Right.
that extended period of time.
Yeah.
so April 10th? There's a blue line there, what does that mean? Hold on.
What time?
That works for me.
That worked for me, so what
I've
time?
written down soccer meeting, okay, all right. 5:30,
Okay.
okey-doke,
Who's gonna bring the champagne?
I'll bring the champagne. Okay. Got it. Gotcha. Okay, any other comments, ideas, suggestions? Thank y'all so much for coming and sticking with us, and I feel like, Mr. Director, any comments or further requests, or is this helping you to get to something useful, or will this be useful, or?
Yeah, the stuff that finance is working on that's not quite done yet
Yeah,
is useful.
good deal. And then hopefully having this group convene and work with the finance director, I think gives us, stuff that we need. So, that being said, we will meet one last time, April 10th. It's Wednesday, April 10th at 5:30, same place. All right, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, we are adjourned.